Hey guys, if you're thinking of getting into cake decorating, this is the most important video to watch because I'm going to teach you the most important step ever in cake decorating to get the smoothest cakes and to just make sure they look really pretty on the outside. And what I'm going to teach you is how to crumb coat a cake. Crumb coating is basically where you lock in all of the crumbs so that when you do the final layer of icing, you don't get any crumbs going through. And I think this is a mistake that a lot of beginners make when they're cake decorating, is you'll see like this beautiful cake, but then you'll see the crumbs coming through and you're like, no. So I'm going to teach you how to not get crumbs showing through your cakes. Anyway, so let's crumb coat a cake together. Let's go! Okay, so obviously you're going to start with a batch of buttercream. This is my American buttercream. It is the nicest, like silkiest, softest buttercream that I make. And I actually just posted a video about this. I'll link it below so you can make this one too because it works so well for cakes. And then I just have my cake here. This is a chocolate mud cake. The reason why it's wrapped is because I like to leave it in the fridge overnight before I crumb coat the cake. That is a really important step because if you're icing a cake the day that you bake it, it's just going to be way too flimsy and it's just not going to be a fun time for you. So yeah, I always recommend to keep your cake in the fridge overnight. Okay, some other things that you're going to need is a turntable. I got this one from my local cake shop, but let me show you a little hack. If you're looking for a really cheap turntable and you're just starting out, I got this Lazy Susan from IKEA. It was so cheap, and this was the one that I used when I was first starting out cake decorating, but I just moved to this one just because I know I like it a bit better. You're also going to need a scraper. And then I like to use 2 offset spatulas. I like to use a small one and a little bit of a bigger one. And then also just like a normal spatula as well. Then to level and cut the cake, I usually just do it with a knife. But if you want to use a cake leveler, that's so fine. I just like to do it this way. But if you want to do the way I do it, you're going to need a ruler, a little knife, and a big serrated knife. You're also going to need a cake board as well, but I'll show you that one later. Anyway, let's get started. We are going to grab our cake. We're going to start by leveling the cake. You want to get the little like hump off the top off because we want a really flat, level cake. So I'm going to start by doing that. So grab your ruler and your little knife. You're going to measure first actually how tall the cake is. So this one is about, I would say it's about 7 centimeters tall. So firstly, you're going to want to measure how tall the cake is, like before it turns into like a hump, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically I'm going to measure it up to like about here. So my cake is about 7 centimeters, so I'm going to mark 7 centimeters all the way along my cake. Alright, perfect. Now you're going to grab the big serrated knife, trust me. It sounds a bit scary, but you got this. So what you're going to do first is you're going to connect the dots that you just made, like with the knife. So you're going to connect all the little marks you just made in the cake. It doesn't matter if it's not too even because we will fix it with our icing. So, yep. And then as you connect them, just keep cutting around and around and around. This is a bit uneven, and then take the top off. Perfect. And you can eat the top. But see how it's nice and flat now? That's how we want to start. All right. Now it's time to layer the cake. So I think I want 3 layers. So it's about, I'm going to do about 2.5 centimeters tall for each. Is that right? Yeah, actually I'm going to do about 2.25 centimeters each. So from the bottom, I'm going to measure about 2.25. The layers aren't going to be that big. So I'm just doing the same thing like before. Perfect. Now I'm just going to show you this so you know. But do you see the marks that I've made in the cake? I don't know if you can. See down the bottom? Those are the ones that I'm connecting together, like I'm tracing around the cake with the knife. So tracing around, tracing around, tracing around. And once you've gone all the way around, then you can start really cutting through, but make sure you're staying in the line. Perfect. That's one layer done. Set that aside. Let's do the next one. Okay, I decided to make those 2 layers a little bit smaller. I don't really know why, it's fine. But if you want it to be really even, you can just make sure you measure them all the same length. Okay, those are my 3 layers. They're not super even because I just decided to make these ones thinner. Not sure why, but yeah. Set those aside. Okay, now it's time to grab your cake board. Okay, let's talk about the size of the cake board. I like to use a board that's about 2 inches bigger than the cake. So this is a 5-inch cake and this is a 7-inch board. I don't know, I just like that the best. I feel like it's easy because you can do decorations like around the cake and, you know, like have things like falling off the cake, and it's so easy to transport. But you can also get a board the exact same size of the cake so that when you like put it on a display or something like that, you won't actually see the board and it would just be the cake. But just know that if you do that, you won't be able to do any like border piping or anything unless you did it right onto the tray you're serving it on, if that makes sense. Okay, now this is where a lot of people like to tell me that I do this wrong. But basically what I do now is I grab my little offset spatula, my smaller one, and I put a blob of icing on the board. I kind of smooth it around and then I go like this. See that? Looks like that. Then I put the cake board on top of that and then I wiggle it a little bit just so you know it won't like move around, so it's like stuck on the board, because you don't want this board moving around while you're icing. But people say I do that wrong because it does leave a little bit of icing on the bottom of the board, but I don't usually see an issue with that because you usually put it on a serving tray anyway. But if you don't want the icing on the bottom, you can use one of those non-slip mats, you know, that you put them on, you can line shelves with it. It's like a crisscross type material. Yeah, you can put that underneath the board and that also works. Alright, we're going to do the same thing on top of the board as well. We're just going to put a blob of icing in the middle of the board, smooth it around. It doesn't matter if it's bigger than the cake, and just do this. Now the first cake slice I like to put down is not the one that's like the very top that we cut off, but the middle piece goes down first. Boom, like so. Alright, now grab your buttercream icing and put just a blob in. It's gonna feel like a lot of icing, but just trust the process. Okay, I'm gonna put, I reckon maybe just a little bit more, like that much. Then grab your bigger one. I feel like the bigger ones work best for this, but you're going to smooth it out. And you're not actually gonna touch the palette knife onto the cake. You never want this to come in contact with the actual cake. You just wanna keep the icing layer in between the spatula and the cake. So just smooth it out like this, pushing it in a pushing motion like this, and then spin it all the way around to make it flat. Done. That's so easy. So that is the first layer, and then I leave the border around. I don't take any icing off because I'll show you. I also put this icing into a little bowl because that's going to be like the crummy icing that you don't want to put back into the big bowl of icing, if that makes sense. All right, now you're going to grab your top piece, and usually this one's a little interesting because it has like the bit of the top that you cut off, so it's a bit curved. So I put the curved part, I turn it over, and I put it down like that. Okay, and I make sure that's all even. And then I grab my little spatula and I smooth this icing up the cake. I like push it into the gaps. So I push it in, push it in, push it in, all the way around. And then I basically scrape it off and I put it into this bowl. And I'm basically pushing the crumbs in. I'm not pushing hard, I'm just like smoothing the crumbs all into the cake. Alright, I think that's good. That's what it should look like. Alright, let's do the last layer. You can do however many layers you want as well. A blob of icing looks about good. You can kind of eyeball it. Some people like to measure exactly, like weigh how much icing. Now you got to be a little bit more careful at this stage because you have like 2 layers and you don't want to move it around too much. So just be gentle, pushing it around, same as we did before, and then smooth it all the way around. Boom, boom. A little trick with the top of the cake, you want to use the flat edge. So this is the edge that actually baked like this. It was the bottom of the cake, but now it's going to become the top of the cake because it's usually the flattest point. So you're going to get like those nice sharp edges. So you're going to flip that over, pop it on top, make sure it's all even. Cool. Grab your little spatula and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to smooth this around the sides and also on the top. Don't worry if some icing is coming out of the bottom one, it's because just like the cake's heavy and we can afford to lose a little bit of excess icing. Don't worry if it also looks crooked right now, because you're going to fix that in a second. Scrape off any icing. You shouldn't have too much icing for the crumb coat because all you're doing is locking in the crumbs. I'm literally pushing it all into the cake. I save some for the top, and you can just keep using icing out of the crummy icing bowl. I don't know, that's like a random hack, but I'm just telling you like exactly how I do it and the reasoning behind it all. And if there's any like kind of dips, my cake has like a little dip, make sure you fix that as well. This is the moment where you can fix all those structural issues of the cake. Like if there's a little, I don't know, sometimes I've had like a little crack in the side, I can like patch that hole up like this and then like scrape around. I'm pretty happy with that so far, but let me show you something else. I'm just gonna grab the excess icing from on the board, just because it's going to be too hard to remove later. Okay, you might be like, why do we need a scraper for the crumb coat? Well, I'm going to show you. So sometimes the crumb coat can get a little bit like lopsided, especially right now it's summer, so the icing's a little bit hotter than normal. Temperatures really affect how you're cooking in the kitchen. Basically, I'm going to just push the cake like this because this is a straight edge, so I'm going to push the cake like this all around to make sure that this is as straight as possible. You're basically just getting all the structure sorted in this step. Okay, perfect. I'm going to lightly scrape around. We don't want to make it lopsided again. And then the final thing, you can kind of see there's excess icing like on the top here. So what I do is I just scrape it and then scrape it off in the bowl. Scrape it off in the bowl. Because if you just do like this, it like the icing that collects will like go around the side, if that makes sense. So you're just gonna scrape. And this will make it really easy to pop the icing on. Then sometimes I'll just get a tissue just to wipe around the board, like this. Make it super clean. Then you can use your palette knife, pop it off the board, and then that is your crumb-coated cake. You're gonna pop that in the fridge. Sometimes if you're doing a quick job and you want it to cool really quickly, you can put it in the freezer for like 5 minutes, but I like to put it in the fridge for about 20 minutes and then I get started on the icing. So anyway, that is how to crumb-coat a cake. That is my final crumb-coated cake. I'm not gonna show you how to ice the cake in this video because I think once you've got the crumb coat done, it's usually pretty easy to pop the icing over because you've got the structure all sorted. But I'll definitely do another video where I actually decorate a cake and show you how I do that another day. I just wanted to share a few troubleshooting things. I had a lot of questions in my buttercream video about like temperature and stuff like that, and like how do you go with your cakes like not melting and things like that. So my advice for that is just always keep it in the fridge. If you're making a buttercream cake, it's butter, so if you leave it out, it's gonna melt. So make sure you keep it in the fridge. And I would say just take it out 20 minutes before serving because then the buttercream will soften a little bit, but it won't fully melt. So that's my little tip on temperature and how to keep it nice and stable. Anyway, thanks for watching my crumb coating video. I hope this was really helpful. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below because I respond to all my comments. I post a new video every single weekend, so make sure you're subscribed and pop the notification bell on so you don't miss any of my cooking videos or my vlogs. But thanks so much for watching and good luck. Have the best day, guys. Bye!